because it's so nice to have that. Like, that's
Why
what makes a
you?
cool podcast.
Yeah, you should.
I know. Seriously, next time it's like, just come sit down.
You listen to like the Meat Eater podcast, and they're always like, "Did you hit the button?"
Yeah, totally. Yep.
But then you also get the podcast where they think that they hit the button, and then you get like half an hour in, and you're like, "Shit, we didn't."
Oh, we didn't hit the button.
Yep. Totally. All right. Well, I'll kick it off.
Yeah.
So welcome to the Curious Hunter podcast. This is it's episode 2, but it's the 3rd episode we've done because episode 0 was our little intro.
Right.
And we're here at Sheep's Head in Paso Robles. And am I saying that right? Paso Robles? Robles?
I think the locals, Robles.
Robles.
Yeah.
That's how the locals say Robles.
The tourists will correct you. And
they'll correct
like,
you.
Robles.
And mine's just Robles. It's just like gibberish.
Just Americanize it.
I'm just lazy in the way that I say it.
Guadalupe.
Mm-hmm.
We say things.
Yeah.
It's pretty gross.
Well, we're here with Dagur.
Yeah.
Am I saying your name right?
Close enough.
Okay. I tried. Tell me how to pronounce it.
Dagur.
There you go. See, I think I would just have trouble pronouncing it.
Yeah. My girlfriend can't even say it.
Yeah. At least it's better, like you said earlier. Some people are just like Dagger.
Yeah.
Dagger.
Anything with a D.
Yeah. My last name is Sontag, and technically it's Zontag in German, but I don't say that.
Very cool.
I'm very lazy about that. That and Paso Robles.
Yeah. And I guess to catch everybody up, last time you saw us or listened to us, the room was much louder.
Mm-hmm.
We were having a party, and we've decided to tone it back. I don't want to throw a party every week.
Mm-hmm.
It's exhausting. And then 2, this is more fun, honestly. Like, that was really fun, but this is like I don't hear well. We know that. So it's like I can hear you, we can talk, we can have a conversation and not feel like, oh, we gotta get through this so we can do the party. So last time there was like little kids running around and a bunch of crazy stuff happening. So so here we are on the other side of the room.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why the view has changed. If you're like, they're not in Sheep's Head anymore.
I like the spot though. Like
sure you
fireside.
will.
Maybe we can kick that on in the winter. And
we will.
Have some our guests can be nice and toasty.
Yeah, absolutely. What else? California big draw results came out.
Mm-hmm,
so if you were, I'm sure by now, that was like a week ago.
Right. If
you got something or didn't get something, maybe you got some points instead. You drew your first tag.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's my first draw. Didn't get anything, so now I have some points, which is cool.
Right.
But I did get a deer tag for the first time.
Right.
So let's see.
What did you end up with?
But I don't remember what areas you mean. Honestly, I can't remember. I'm still so new to this.
I think you ended up with Zone A, I think.
Yeah, Zone A.
Here.
But yeah. There's a few different.
There's north and south.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff. But
yeah.
So that's awesome. So if shameless plug, if you did draw something and you need some gear, come on into Sheep's Head Outfitters and we'll take care of you. I will take care of you. There's no we just yet.
Yeah.
Unless these guys are in here, they'll help you too. But so that's exciting stuff.
Yeah.
And now I guess, let's the guest of honor.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being here. I've heard so much about you from Tim, and he's talked about all your fly fishing escapades and the fact that you're here in the Central Coast. You're from Iceland. So maybe tell us a little bit more about how you ended up here.
Yeah, so I moved out here with my mom, kind of middle school age, up to the Monterey area. And she went to Stanford, and that's why we moved out here. And kind of, it was supposed to be 1 year, and then we just kind of ended up staying because it's really nice. And I ended up coming down here for school at Cal Poly. Fished a little bit too much, but fished too much to graduate it, but ended up staying down here. And
So growing up in Iceland so you were like, what, 13 when you moved here?
Yeah, 10.
10.
Yeah.
Oh, so did you fish back home already?
Yes, yeah. I've been fishing since I was like 2.
Okay, since you were 2 years old, and always fly fishing?
No, so it started off with, so neither of my parents really fish, and my dad just would take me to the pier.
Right.
Just to kind of
drop a line in.
Yeah, like a fatherly thing to do.
Yeah.
And, it was kind of a mistake on his part because I didn't leave. And then when I was like 6, I saw like fly fishing in a magazine and thought it was like the coolest thing I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
So Just started like pulling apart shoelaces and tying them onto worm hooks and finding feathers all around the floor, like the ground, and making flies. And tying them that way. And kind of decided at that point I'd only fly fish.
Yeah.
Because it looks cool.
Yeah, it does. It does. It is. So if you don't know what fly fishing looks like, it is the coolest type of fishing. Yeah. Well, there's some pretty cool deep sea stuff too. No, and I say that mostly because as fly fishermen, we get a lot of flack for, being fly fishermen. So But so you were 10, you moved over, you had your 10-year-old fly rod.
Yes.
And you just kept fishing.
Yeah, like I'd get dropped off at like some lakes and I'd just find some ponds, and then I had like a 6-piece rod I'd have in my school backpack and just take the bus after school and wherever there was water.
Do you remember what it was, your 6-piece rod?
It was a Reddington, like a classic trout.
Yeah.
So like a 3-weight.
Awesome.
Perfect for bass and bluegill, and a little too light for the carp that I saw.
Yeah. And I guess that's something we should sort of illustrate. So you've been here, but you do go back to Iceland. Yeah.
So when we moved here, I moved out here with my mom, but my dad always lived in Iceland, so I've always been kind of back and forth. I'd spend the summers there, and then I guide in Iceland over the summers still. So usually go from July through September.
Okay. So. And this area, I mean, maybe just because I'm not super into fly fishing yet, but it doesn't seem like an area that you would go fly fishing a lot. Because whenever I think about it and I see my friends, they're like going up to like Sacramento or the Sierras or out of state. Yeah. So why is this area, conducive to fly fishing?
I think, part of the reason why I started guiding here was because I'd always hear people talking about how they needed to drive 6 hours to catch anything on a fly rod, which just isn't true. We have water here, we have lakes and smaller streams, and you can fish in the ocean. And we got carp, which people kind of overlook, but they're big fish.
Yeah.
So you can catch big fish within like 20 minutes of Paso.
Right.
And it's just, it's a beautiful place. People overlook it because it's not the traditional kind of Montana river runs through it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people
movie.
Yeah. It's a lot of people want that out of their fishing experience, that like flowing water and like trees, and they kind of don't think about the lakes as like a fishing option or the surf.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think it's growing.
I think so too. I couldn't agree more. And we've talked when you've been in the store, and I spent the last almost 15 years in Texas, where same thing.
Yeah.
We've got a few more flowing rivers, but carp were my favorite. Bass on the fly,
super fun.
Yeah. Carp, bluegills, any kind of sunfish. And there is the southernmost trout stream in America is in Austin, Texas, but it's all stocked fish. And so to get out there and catch those bass and those carp year round is super fun. And I will echo your sentiments. I get people every day that come in here and say like, well, there's no fly fishing around here. Like, why do you sell fly fishing stuff?
Yeah.
To which I respond, I'm not a purist, if that's what pure fly fishing is.
Yeah.
And I would say, would you you're known for catching carp.
Yeah.
Do you like that?
Yeah, I do. I love carp. I love carp. It was part of like when we moved out here. I started going to the lakes, and you just see the biggest fish that was there.
Yeah.
And I wanted to catch that.
Yeah.
And I think it's weird because in Europe, carp are the most popular sport fish.
Right.
Just all around.
Right.
And when you come to like the U.S., there is kind of a negative outlook towards carp.
Right.
Just because they tend to be. The reason we brought them over to the U.S. in the first place is the rivers were too polluted for brook trout back east.
Right.
Due to the Industrial Revolution. So there was like people like newspaper headlines, people asking for carp to come and as a food source.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And they brought them over from Europe and planted them across the U.S., spread them west with the railroads to feed the workers.
Sure.
But the image carp have always had in the U.S. was this fish that lives in muddy water. And then they kind of got blamed for a lot of the issues, like where native fish were, declining.
So they were they were detrimental ecologically.
Yeah. But they also get blamed.
Was.
Yeah, that's the narrative. But they get blamed for it because they're the last thing that'll survive in it.
Yeah.
So like here we had the drought, right? That was here for like 10 years.
Yeah.
And a lot of the lakes were like super low. Everything was like low oxygen, and like the bass species were dying off because they're dropping, and the eggs are dry.
Sensitive. Even those tough fish are sensitive.
Yeah, and even the carp were dying off.
Yeah.
But like the last thing to survive in those lakes was always carp, and people would be like, "Oh, the carp have eaten all the native fish," and forgetting to think about the fact that there's no water left for them.
Yeah.
That's super interesting. And so now you take this fish and you make a living on, not just carp, obviously.
No.
The ocean is right there, and and then bass and other sunfish and things like that. And,
yeah, absolutely.
But the carp, are they a technical fish to catch? Are they picky? I've found them to be quite picky, but I'm not as good a fisherman as you are.
They can be very picky, and it's all like small details when you approach the fish, and they're very varied. So like here we have like the winter season is all dry flies.
Yeah.
They're feeding on midges. It's much longer casts. Then in like starting in spring, they're like coming up shallow and they're tailing in like inches of water, kind of like redfish or bonefish. And like your cast has to be pretty much perfect. You can't have anything like shiny on you. Don't wear like an orange jumpsuit when you go chase them. Okay. Don't drink a Coors Light can as you're walking up to them because they're scared.
Interesting.
Isn't that?
Yeah. So like, and they'll hear you like if you step on a rock wrong. So you got to walk really slowly.
Right.
Okay.
And they're technical in kind of like a different way than like a trout would be.
Right.
And you got to match the hatch, but you don't need to be as specific on matching the hatch as you would with the trout. But you need to match the general food item.
Huh.
But the thing that makes them fun is how tricky they are. And
Right.
They're constantly having to adjust. Every day is different, and every day, like throughout the day, is completely different. They'll have one feeding behavior in the morning and afternoon, and that makes them fun.
Yeah,
and different throughout the season.
And for the aspiring carp chaser out there, what would you recommend, like from an equipment setup? Like, you're not. I guess maybe you could chase them on the same thing you're chasing brook trout on. Is that too light a tackle, or?
If you're fishing in like small creeks, you can get away with like a 3 or 4 weight. But in general, if you want to get a dedicated carp setup, I'd say like a 6 or 7 weight would be your best all around. Floating line and a good reel, because these fish fight hard.
Yeah, they do.
How big are they typically?
So around here, like the average size is like 7 to 10 pounds.
Oh wow. Okay.
But they get big.
Like that's average. That's
but
average.
like they top out at around
Not the
30
2-pound
pounds
bass
here.
that you're typically finding most
No.
places.
Which is also why it was crazy to me when we moved out here why people didn't love these fish, because they're absolutely massive.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Are you? I mean, I know traditionally, fly fishing is like catch and release is like mostly the thing. Is that your case too, or are you sometimes keeping? Or
for the carp, I pretty much catch and release all of them. I've never looked at a carp and said, "This
Yum.
looks delicious."
But at the same time that we talked about, like, the environment, and a lot of people would look at you and be like, why are you releasing that carp back into the water? Like, it's gonna eat the other fish, right?
Yeah.
Quotations.
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
Well, because the places we usually find these carp is like, the lakes around here, they're reservoirs, man-made lakes, or streams where they're now too warm to harbor steelhead.
Right.
So the native fish are pretty much gone. So the only thing left in these lakes is bass, bluegill, catfish, carp.
Right.
Basically all fish that we've brought over.
Right.
They're not native to California.
yeah.
So it's always seemed like back to kind of how it's the view on carp seems weird to me here is like carp gets singled out as like the problem fish, whereas you have striped bass and bass, which directly hurt the native fish by eating them. Carp eat clams, worms, leeches, midges.
Yeah.
In my opinion, we're not getting rid of these things.
Right.
So by releasing them, we let them get a little bigger.
Right.
What I've noticed in lakes where people tend to, so around here you can't bowfish for them.
Right.
In the lakes, it's banned. But in some lakes in California, you can bowfish for them.
Sure.
And what that seems to do is just open up the floodgates for a ton of small carp, but no big carp.
Right.
When you catch and release them, you have bigger carp, but not like an overwhelming number of small ones.
Yeah.
So we're not gonna fish ourselves out of this carp, if you look at it this way, intrusion.
We're never getting rid of them.
Right.
I don't think any place they've been introduced have they been gotten rid of.
A similar take to like feral hogs.
Pretty much.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That I think that it opens a lot of eyes because I tell people, purist fly fishermen, like, oh yeah, I love chasing carp, and they look at me like I'm crazy. And I think that you bring a good perspective, a good point of view. One, it's the number one sport fish in Europe. Mm-hmm. Not that we need to do everything like Europe. That's not what we're saying. But these fish are a vital part of the ecosystem now in those rivers and lakes that they are.
Yeah.
And sure, some places they're probably overcrowded, yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely places where like they impact the native species, and then you need to manage them accordingly.
Yeah.
But I think in like the man-made lakes and with fish that we've all introduced into here,
Yeah.
they should be treated the same way you treat a bass. And the thing about the purist fly fisherman too is, as a purist fly, I consider myself a carp purist. But
Sure.
but people will, they go on a dream trip to Montana.
Yeah.
And what's the main fish they're catching there?
Trout.
Yeah, brown trout.
Yeah.
Rainbow trout.
Yeah.
Brown trout were brought in from Europe after we brought the first carp.
Yep.
Brown trout are not native to any part of the United States,
Sure.
but they're still considered this highly prized.
Mm-hmm.
The movie got them.
Yeah.
That's funny.
No.
I'm forgetting.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, I've never been on. I've been on an ocean charter, but never a guided, fish expedition where I've been out, kind of doing something, with someone like yourself. What does that look like?
For a day of carping. So if you come out with me like fly fishing with carp, we start by just walking. We don't start casting at all.
Okay.
So unlike most typical fishing you'll do, you're blind casting or casting to like a rising fish. Here with a carp, it's kind of like hunting. You're stalking them. You don't make a cast until you see the fish, you see how he's feeding.
Cool.
All that stuff. And if you're a beginner, we just work on your casting and stuff a little bit beforehand so you know the basics. But other than that, we're just going to start walking, looking for fish, dialing in, getting you a couple of rejections right off the bat, which is going to happen. But I think it's a very what I like about the carp and the guiding for carp. It's super visual. Everything you don't cast at a fish you don't see. All the fish you see eat the fly. You'll see about like 2,000 fish in a day.
Wow.
Like it's crazy.
Wow.
So you really are. It's like spot and stock for.
Yeah, it's
fish.
like the closest thing to hunting you'll get.
Cool.
In a fishing sense.
That's rad.
That's really cool.
I had no idea that it was. I mean, I'm so used to just going to like the Atascadero Lake and bass fishing out there and coming up empty-handed all the time.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I think that's so fascinating too because, again, not to say that we shouldn't or can't fish for carp from boats. I'm sure there's great advantage to that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But it's such a different perspective. Here's this fish. Not only are we looking at this fish differently than we maybe thought first, which was trash fish, but now we're also like fishing for it different than we would normally fish for a lot of different fish.
It's like bow hunting in a way.
Yeah.
Like doing it this way seems harder, but a lot more rewarding.
Yeah, I think it's a lot more exciting.
Yeah.
What I like about the Central Coast in general, there's just so many fish we can side fish for. Right. So we can side fish for the bass here too.
Sure.
In the rivers and
how's that different, like compared to carp when you're
bass are aggressive.
Bass? Okay.
So bass are in general much easier to catch. Just take a given bass and a carp.
Right.
A carp won't move more than like 3 inches for the fly.
Okay.
Because there's so much food for him to eat. Whereas a bass, he'll come out somewhere and chase down a fly. And depending on which bass species you're chasing, you're going to fish for him a little differently. But in general, we're fishing for bass with like bigger streamers, a little bit more active fishing. And you're casting, you're either blind casting or like casting at schools of fish that you see or solo fish that you see hunting. You're going to be stripping streamers, which is just when you're moving them really fast and kind of getting a little bit more aggressive eats out of the fish. But
cool.
That's kind of the main difference.
Yeah.
And carp fight harder.
Man, that sounds so fun. I can't believe I've never tried this.
We're gonna make a convert of you yet.
Yeah.
I've just been swim baits. That's all I've been doing.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things when I'm guiding is you see people who are kind of like on the fence about carp, and I've kind of had to convince them a little bit to come out and chase carp, and then kind of all my convincing's done by the time they see the first one, even if they haven't even made the cast, they just see it. And
what is it? Is it the
so
size?
cool.
Is it because they're beautiful fish?
Yeah.
Anyone that doesn't think they're beautiful is lying.
Yeah, I know. I think that's why people have them in koi ponds and
Yeah,
stuff.
they're unreal, pretty. Do you think that they see the fish and that's what it is? It's just the beauty and the size and the
Yeah, I think that. I mean, it's just like
them.
and the way they're eating. I mean, they're in like inches of water. And
Yeah.
Wow.
Right now they're half out of the water basically.
Yeah.
They're feeding on the shoreline.
It's so crazy.
And then in the wintertime they're feeding up top, and you see them kind of just like mouths popping over the surface in the waves.
Yeah.
Every carp I see, I get excited to see it.
Your season here is almost done.
Pretty much, yeah.
What's next?
Iceland. So I go to Iceland at the start of July, it's June right now, but July.
And you guide over there?
Yeah, for Atlantic salmon and brown trout.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Talk to us a little bit about that, because you're like North Pole, South Pole.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's completely
literally
different.
carp, Atlantic salmon.
Yeah, it's always funny because Atlantic salmon is kind of known throughout the fly fishing world as like the king of sport fish. You know,
Right.
it's like basically where fly fishing kind of started the way it is now.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever caught a salmon?
No.
I've never caught a salmon either.
Nope.
I mean, they're cool fish.
Yeah.
They're very expensive to chase Atlantic
Right.
salmon.
Right.
But they're very fun. Beautiful,
Right.
come out of the ocean. And Atlantic salmon, unlike Pacific salmon, they will go up into the ocean, up into the rivers, spawn, and then they'll go back out in the ocean, and they can come back a second year.
Right.
They don't die the way they
Right.
do in like Alaska, where
Right.
you see them feeding the whole ecosystem.
Right. Right.
And then the brown trout we have in there, which is my favorite thing in Iceland, is it's a stock of brown trout which are completely native to Iceland. They've been there for 10,000 years, since the last ice age, and they get old, they get really big.
Wow. Yeah. What's the biggest that you've caught?
Somewhere around 20 pounds. I mean, I didn't weigh it. You can
Wow.
tape it out, but they get big. And we get them up to like 30 pounds in some of the lakes.
That's crazy.
And they eat big stuff. They'll bully the salmon out of a
Mhm,
pool, and
mhm.
you see them attack smaller trout. And the flies we're fishing, for the trout are, massive,
Gotcha.
up to 12 inches. And
Wow.
it's kind of like muskie
Jeez.
fishing for
Really?
brown trout, yeah.
Yeah.
Just a bird on the end of your line.
I've
Pretty
caught plenty
much.
of brown trout, but not with a 12-inch fly. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, it's cool, and because like they're specifically evolved to like the river systems that they're in. So
Right.
like they like the river I spend most of my time guiding on, and have since I was 16. They just like don't have much food in there,
Right.
so they just like have pretty much evolved to basically spawn in one pool and then drop down below, wait for those eggs to hatch, and then the buffet is on.
Wow.
And then the fish that survive know what's up, and
And the cycle continues.
yeah, it's brutal.
That's super cool.
I had something. Oh, I've been. Have you been to Iceland?
No.
I've been to Iceland.
Wow.
It's a wonderful culture. The
Yeah.
people are super friendly. I loved my time there. I didn't get to do any fishing. That is a lead into like fishing culture, and like what like it again. It must be polar opposites. Not only are you fishing for fish that are so different from each other, but the cultures of fishing, I'd imagine, are fairly different as well. I mean, you're probably guiding a lot of Americans though too, huh?
So for the salmon, it's all English pretty much, or Europeans, Northern Europeans, some Spanish.
And so are the
Italians.
cultures like a day of chasing carp with you versus a day of chasing salmon with you? Or is it a totally different experience, like culturally?
Yeah, because salmon, there's a lot of history behind it.
Yeah.
So like the funny thing is like when you fish with like guys from Scotland, they'll get dressed up in kind of their specific salmon outfit, which is like wool jackets and pants.
Right.
And like they get all really nicely dressed up for it, because for them it's almost like a religious experience to fish for salmon.
Wow.
And then on the other side of that, you have like maybe people who are newer to it, but salmon fishing is very expensive, so there's a lot of expectation on it.
Okay.
And people tend to go for 4 to 6 days, kind of when they're chasing the salmon. It's just, I mean, that's different.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
hours of the day that we fish are different. It's very rigid. We
Uh-huh.
fish from 7 to 1.
Okay.
And you take a break in the middle to allow the fish to kind of move around, and then you go out again in the evenings. So 6 hours in the morning, 6 hours in the afternoon.
Right.
But yeah.
Similar to bird hunting out here. Like, you hunt doves in the morning, and then you hunt dove again at sunset. You take
Yeah.
a break, take a nap, eat
Yeah.
your lunch.
Yeah.
So these gentlemen that are these folks that are like getting dressed up, for them, like it is a massive part of their culture and who they are. And then you come out here and we're wearing flip flops and
Yeah.
shorts and whatever else. So it's completely like, I wouldn't say like irreverent out here, but laid back.
It's a lot more laid back out here. I like that.
You
But,
do?
It's also just like coming from like Scotland or England. It's such a deep, rich history with the salmon there.
Right.
And like fishing in Iceland was kind of like for salmon was started when the English were coming there in like the 1800s to come fish for salmon. And then our whole fishing setup in Iceland right now, like today, is still based on that old English system.
wow,
Of like
cool.
everything spit into beats. The time of days that we fish is the same you would in England.
Wow.
And like the majority of the clientele have most of the time been English.
Wow.
So it seems like out here it's more of the sport or the activity there. It's more the heritage and tradition.
Yeah. I think here you can be a little bit more flexible with it, just because everything's so young.
Yeah.
Even just historically, I mean,
Right.
the area is pretty young.
Yeah.
Where we live.
So you're out in lakes, rivers, streams, ocean.
Here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you have a preference between all the different types of bodies of water?
I mean, I love lakes.
Okay.
I love kind of big lakes because they're kind of mysterious.
Mm-hmm.
You never know what you're going to get. But I would have a hard time saying, like, I have one favorite over the other.
Yeah,
as per
yeah.
rivers
They're
or
all so
lakes.
different,
Yeah,
yeah.
I have, like, rivers have their own charm.
Mhm.
The ocean has its own charm. I do kind of prefer freshwater, I think.
Okay.
But
What are you going for when you are out in the ocean? Like,
so in the beaches we have surf perch, striped bass, and then you can fish like the tide pools, and you get rockfish,
Okay.
lingcod,
Cool.
cabezon.
I never thought you could do that with fly. That's
Oh,
so
yeah,
interesting
yeah.
to me. I just went out like my first 2 times trying to go for perch, not fly fishing.
Yeah.
So that was really fun just to even start to get into that.
Yeah,
So is
yeah.
it similar where you're just waiting out and then?
Yeah, you just wait out. I mean, the funny thing with the surf is the fish tend to be closer than people think. So
interesting.
like, don't
Okay.
wade out super deep. Just start like ankle deep and fish like
See,
the
I'm
super
trying
shallows.
to chuck it way out there. That's my problem.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're like early in the morning, you'll see the fish like basically
Okay.
right in the shallows.
Okay.
So you just kind of start shallow and work your way out, and then usually we don't wade out deeper than your knee.
Right.
In the beaches down here.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about the beaches in this area is they're kind of, I think, like the perfect mix between Northern California and Southern California. We don't have the huge swells that they get up in Northern California,
Yeah.
and we don't have kind of the limp swells that
Yeah,
Southern
yeah.
California gets.
Limp, that's a way.
Yeah, that's one way to put it.
It always just
I'm
looks
totally
flat when I
fine
drive down
talking
there.
about Southern California like that.
Yeah.
Is
Totally fine.
Yeah.
Is there any access issues? Like I was wondering, because I live in Cambria,
Yeah.
and I'm always like, can I just go out and fish anywhere, like on these beaches? Do you know if there's like certain areas up and down the coast that you can't fish? If so, why?
Most of the beaches are pretty open to you coming on there.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, if it's on private property, the access,
Right.
it'll be harder to get onto, but we don't have too much of that down here.
Okay.
And there's a few areas where we have like marine protected areas. There's one just north of San Simeon that kind of reaches all the way up to Point Sierra, Nevada, which
Gotcha.
is kind of on the southern end of Big Sur.
Yeah.
And you can find all that information if you just look online.
Okay.
But
Cool.
aside from that, everything's pretty open. That season is open year round.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fun fisher.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to try this. Sounds
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Glad you're getting some new gear. 'Cause
Yeah, well, that's true. Well, it's always been amazing to me, like the evolution of fly fishing and watching these guys throw these huge rods and flies and lines for marlin and sailfish and things like that, and really choppy seas. And
Yeah.
it's just fascinating. But it's sort of looks like, hey, look, I can do it too.
Yeah.
We can do it too. We don't need, but I love that. And, we've been talking back and forth about me getting out into surf fishing a lot more. It's something that I started fishing in Idaho.
Yeah.
And so it was like that Purist, the movie and things like that, and
Yeah.
guiding up there and stuff, and have slowly like devolved into now I just like, if it swims, I'll fish it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Love it.
It's a good way to live.
Yeah.
If you are fishing for food, what is that?
Oh, what's the best tasting fish around here?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, freshwater, probably crappie. But
Yeah.
Okay.
But then in the ocean, the rockfish,
Yeah.
pretty great.
Yeah.
I mean, surf perch is decent.
Mm-hmm.
But rockfish, I'd say, is probably the best that
Yeah.
we catch kind of on the shoreline over here.
So you're catching rockfish with fly. I had no idea.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you can
it's
go
off the tide pools.
low tide.
Okay.
You pick the pockets in the tide pools, kind of just like you're fishing a river.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
That's a fun way to
Yeah,
fish.
there's that Leffingwell area in Cambria.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know. So it
yeah.
always seems like there's actually like this like ledge that kind of comes around. It's
Yeah.
like almost like a shelf, and it always looks like
There you go.
it's a little bit of a jetty sort of thing. Like
Yeah.
it seems like you can kind of walk out there. So I've always been
Yeah.
curious. Like,
You can get a rockfish off of that.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's
I'm
what we're
gonna do
doing.
it.
That's what we gotta get you a rockfish. And
Yeah.
then you're.
And I've got them from charters for
Sure.
sure.
Yeah.
But never, I have never caught anything in the ocean that wasn't off a boat. So it'll be really cool. I can't wait for my first time to get something that's not on a boat.
Yeah.
It's so cool to me.
I love shore fishing.
Yeah. It's so fun.
Boots on the ground.
It's so active.
Mano a mano.
I love that. Yeah, totally.
What, I think we've talked a lot about, obviously this podcast is streamed all over the world, wherever you are. But, for somebody that is maybe living in an area where they say there's no fly fishing here, but they are curious and they want to get into fly fishing. What would you recommend that they do? Look up a guide like yourself, or find a fly shop, or
look up a guide or a fly shop, or if you don't have either of those, just look for a body of water.
Yeah,
if it has fish in it, you can catch it on the fly.
Yeah,
and I think that's what most people don't fully understand, is they think often when they're starting to get into fly fishing, that fly fishing is purely dry fly trout,
right,
or like maybe nymphing and trout.
Right.
That's definitely what I thought.
Yeah, but you can catch anything with a fly rod, and if people are catching fish in your area, you can catch them with a fly.
Right. Yeah. So if you're out in the Central Coast and you think there's no fly fishing here, call this guy up. Come hang out with me at the shop. We'll get you dialed in. We're rapidly expanding the fly fishing lines here. No pun intended.
And we'll have to make a film.
Yeah.
At some point.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That'll be awesome. I want to capture that. Like you said, that first day of just like stalking it. That seems so fascinating, and I want to like see the whole process and capture it. It'd be so fun.
It's super cool.
Yeah.
Where can people find you? Where like Instagram? Tell us about that.
So Instagram, I'm at Dagur Fish Hunter.
Okay.
Which is a name I took off a David Hasselhoff film, but a B movie.
That's awesome.
He was a fish hunter, but
The Fish Hunter.
that's probably the easiest way to reach me.
Yeah.
Also, my website, dagurflyfish.com.
Okay.
But then I'm also on Facebook and that.
Yeah.
But Instagram's probably where I'm most active.
Yeah. And if you forget or you didn't hear any of that, call the shop. I can put you in touch with them as well. Happy to do that. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Of course.
Thank you so
Any
much.
questions for us? Put us on the spot at all?
More just like you guys have to go out and catch some carp.
Yeah, let's go. I'm ready. Like whenever. You're out there 5 days a week.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Wow.
You got to have home life, so you got to
Yeah.
you got to have a
Be home
couple
on the
days
weekends.
to make people happy there. Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you a
Thank
lot.
you so much,
Yeah.
man.
Thanks for
Appreciate
having
it.
me. Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome.
All right. We did it.
Hopefully that wasn't too painful.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah.
I learned a lot.